Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. It's been no secret. There's been a ton of buzz surrounding this Michigan program on the recruiting trail. And you take a look at this week and the amount of talent that's expected to be on campus for this Michigan program, a massive opportunity for Sherrone Moore and this coaching staff to continue that momentum on the recruiting trail. Want to take a deep dive into some of my favorite prospects that will be on campus for this Michigan program. Fired up to get into it. Before we do it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Michigan fans. Y'all know I'm a Michigan fan. I love talking the recruiting trail and the amount of support you guys have shown the boys in the middle of the summer, checking out some recruiting episodes. That stuff means the absolute world to us. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. If we get any commitments coming out of the weekend, doing film deep dives, breaking them down. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Going to be a very exciting next couple of weeks for this Michigan program on the recruiting trail. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with, at least in my mind, the crown jewel for this Michigan class in 2025, and that is five-star offensive tackle Andrew Babalola from the state of Kansas. Now, the Michigan fans who've been rocking with the fellas the last couple of weeks certainly know this name. We've talked extensively about him, and you kind of get a sense of how this recruitment goes. I think Michigan has got a really good chance to land this kid. Now, you get into Andrew Babalola and say, probably the freakiest athlete at the offensive tackle position we see in this 2025 cycle, a former basketball player that is still learning the game of football, and that is very apparent on the film, but he has those traits that you simply can't teach. He's a phenomenal athlete. As a former basketball player, you see the footwork and athleticism clearly on display on the high school football field. But I think more importantly, this is a guy that has the upside of a top 10 NFL draft pick if he gets the right development. And then you look at this Michigan program and the development that has taken place on the offensive line. I think you could argue that there's not a program in the country over the last 5 years that has done a better job developing offensive linemen than this Michigan program. This seems to be, in my mind, a perfect fit for Andrew Babalola. A couple other things that I think are working for Michigan in the direction is, one, this kid's from the state of Kansas. Sherrone Moore grew up in the state of Kansas. I think Sherrone Moore is going to have his fingerprints all over this recruitment. And I think, secondly, you look at Andrew Babalola and you start reading some articles, listening to some interviews about what matters to Andrew Babalola. Life off the football field certainly matters. And Stanford has emerged as a contender for Andrew Babalola. I think one of the schools that, probably can compete with Stanford in terms of opportunities off the football field is this Michigan program. And so you look at all the boxes that Michigan checks for someone like Andrew Babalola. I think there's a lot of boxes checked. I think this is a guy that Sherrone Moore certainly wants in this 2025 class. I am very interested to see if Michigan can really grab some momentum with this recruitment over the weekend. My favorite prospect for Michigan in this 2025 cycle. Now, another offensive lineman that I think is a sneaky, really intriguing get for Michigan is Bishop Gorman offensive lineman Eli Kani-Valu. I think that's how you say the name. Now, you look at this kid, and very similar to how we talked about the other two Bishop Gorman offensive linemen and SJ and Douglas Utu, you look at this kid and say he just seems to be a lock for a multi-year starter at the Power 5 level, and he brings a lot of versatility. This is a guy that's played left tackle at the high school level, played the center position for Bishop Gorman in 2023. What you're getting with this guy is just a polished offensive lineman that, probably doesn't have the upside that Andrew Babalola does in terms of the freakish athletic traits that Andrew Babalola brings to the table. This is a nasty, nasty offensive lineman, specifically in the run game. He works up to the second level very well. This is the prototypical offensive lineman that Michigan wants to land out of the recruiting trail. I think this would make a lot of sense for Michigan. Again, we know they swing a very big sword in terms of how they recruit offensive linemen, because they can sell to these kids that you come to Michigan, you're going to get developed into an NFL draft pick on the offensive line. Two massive opportunities with two of my favorite offensive linemen in the 2025 cycle. And let's get into a position that Michigan wants to recruit better out of high school, and that's the wide receiver spot. Quincy Porter, coming from the state of New Jersey, massive target for Michigan. This one sounds like it's going to be Michigan, Ohio State. And I think what Michigan needs to sell Quincy Porter with is, hey, you can come in and be the guy early for this Michigan offense. I don't think that's something that Ohio State can sell to these wide receivers. Michigan can sell that to Quincy Porter. I think they can show him this Michigan offense and say, hey, we are missing a guy like you in our offense. You're going to get opportunity to work vertically down the field. You get into the film of Quincy Porter, there's not many more physically imposing wide receivers than you see with Quincy Porter, a guy that has a track and field background, can work vertically down the field. But kind of what stands out to me about Quincy Porter, you take a look at the height and weight and say, all right, 6'3", 190 pounds, probably just a big-bodied vertical wide receiver that excels in those contested catch situations down the football field. That's certainly something he brings to this Michigan offense. Something that I think is really sneaky about Quincy Porter that you're not used to talking about with these kind of wide receivers is the separation and what he can do after the catch. This is a wide receiver that you turn on the film and say, he is running really, really clean routes. He's creating separation. And when he creates separation, gets the football in space, he is an absolute bear for defensive backs to bring down. I think this is a wide receiver that Michigan can get in, play early during his college career, and kind of just bring some much needed juice to this Michigan wide receiver room. Moving on to another wide receiver that's not necessarily as nationally coveted, but I think a really sneaky, intriguing target for Michigan is Philip Wright from the state of Louisiana. Now, I believe Ron Bellamy went to the same high school as Philip Wright in Louisiana, so that certainly helps in this recruitment. You look at Philip Wright and you just say speed, right? He's a little undersized at 5'11", 160, runs a 10.6 in the 100-meter dash, and that athleticism and juice, if you will, certainly shows up on the high school film. This is a guy that if you just get the football to in space, good things are going to happen. Kind of reminds you of what Samaj Morgan was for Michigan as a freshman and what he can be over the next couple of years as, just a playmaker in this Michigan passing attack that, again, Michigan might have lacked over the last couple of years. You have Quincy Porter, a guy that I think can work vertically down the field, make defenses respect what Michigan is going to do attacking the deeper third, which is certainly going to help the run game. And then you have a guy in Philip Wright who is a different kind of wide receiver, a different flavor of wide receiver, but another guy that can bring some of those explosive plays to this Michigan offense. One of the fastest players in this 2025 cycle, a very intriguing target for Michigan. The last position group that I want to talk about is in the back end. And you're seeing Lamar Morgan really dig his teeth into a lot of these top defensive backs. Let's talk about four-star cornerback Shamari Earls, who's committed to South Carolina, but canceled his South Carolina official visit. Now is going to be visiting Michigan and Georgia. It sounds like those are the two leaders in the clubhouse to end up with Shamari Earls. You look at Shamari Earls, and for the Michigan fans who've been rocking with the fellas, this is my kind of cornerback at 6'2", 180. He is physically imposing as a boundary cornerback. He plays both sides of the football, has a track and field background. So you start looking at the boxes that Shamari Earls checks. Big time frame, track and field background, so he can run with wide receivers vertically down the field and has the ball skills as a former wide receiver. And I'll just say this as a side note. I think Shamari Earls could play wide receiver too. Like, digging into his film, yes, the cornerback film is extremely impressive. He will be a very good cornerback at the collegiate level. This kid with the football in his hands, in terms of the quick twitch, the big frame, and what he can do after the catch, I think he certainly could play the wide receiver spot too. And I wonder if that's where Michigan ends up recruiting him. We'll see. If he commits to Michigan, we'll get into the film. You guys will kind of get a sense of what I see on the film in terms of him maybe being a wide receiver or potentially a wide receiver. The last one I want to talk about, another four-star prospect from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Jaden Blair. And this sounds like it's coming down to Notre Dame, Michigan, maybe Penn State as well. Notre Dame, the leader in the clubhouse. Jaden Blair reminds me of Makari Page, but maybe just a little bit more physically developed. If you remember Makari Page coming out of high school, this kid was rail thin, super long safety that needed to put on some weight his first couple of years. He did just that, emerged as one of the best safeties in the country in 2023. You look at Jaden Blair, this is my kind of defensive back where he can do a lot of different things. He has a ton of length in the back end to cover a lot of field as a single high safety, but he's that safety that you look at where offenses are going, having those jumbo wide receivers, those tight ends that are split out wide. You need safeties that can deal with that kind of size in that slot wide receiver role. You see Makari Page do a phenomenal job doing that with his frame for this Michigan program. Look at Jaden Blair and say he can do a very similar role that Makari Page plays for this Michigan defense. And it goes back to what we always talk about. Michigan, they know what they want on the recruiting trail. They recruit guys that are good football players, but also fit what Michigan want to do from a schematic standpoint. I think Jaden Blair is one of those kind of guys. Really interested to see if Michigan can gain some momentum with Jaden Blair on this official visit. That'll do it. Those are my favorite targets for Michigan that will be on campus this weekend. Again, if we get any commitments, you guys know we'll be breaking them down. Appreciate y'all rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.